You actually said that you're currently $600 million in debt.
1.2 billion.
1.2 billion, okay. There we go.
And the reason I talk about debt is because in 1971, when I was in Vietnam, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard.
Right.
They don't tell you that, and the money became debt. And so then these communist school teachers tell you to get out of debt. But debt is money today. Why do I buy a $50,000 watch, let's say it is, and gold rings and all this? Well, the reason is because the national debt of America is through the frickin' roof. We're going bankrupt. The way America, with our politicians, the way they solve their problems is they print money. One thing wrong with printing money: the rich get richer and the poor middle class get poorer. And the reason this happens is every time the government prints money, which started in 1971 when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. Every time you print money, the rich get richer. Let me say it again. When you print money, governments print money, which are printing all over the world today, the rich are getting richer because assets go up in value. What else goes up in price are food, eggs, and stuff like this. So the rich get richer because they have real money, but the poor and middle class get hammered because inflation's killing them.
I own 15,000 houses. Nothing wrong with buying a house.
Yeah.
Difference is I use debt to buy it.
Okay.
And I pay no taxes. It's not the house, it's not the stock, it's not the bond, it's not the ETF, it's your brains. So I would rather use debt and pay no taxes. So when I go to a bank and I say I want to borrow $20 million, I get huge tax breaks because I'm creating money. But if I use my credit card, I get nothing. Okay, it's up here. Your greatest assets between this year and this year, this year.
Well, in Rich Dad Poor Dad, I came out in 1997 and I said, your house is not an asset. And it drove people nuts. It just went crazy on me because that's a common belief. But when you can't make your house payments, you find out it's the biggest liability you got, and many of the times.
It's turned out to be very much more correct than you even thought.
Right.
When you look at what's happened to home prices.
Right. And Donald and I love real estate. Well, real estate is, to me, the best vehicle, but you've got to be smart with it.
In today's world, if you want to be rich, you have to know the difference between assets versus liabilities. One of the reasons so many people are struggling financially today is simply because they're calling their liabilities assets, such as your house is not an asset, your car is not an asset, and things like that. So very simply, when I was a young boy, my rich dad taught me, he says, you have to understand a financial statement. So this is an income statement, this is a balance sheet. Now this is overly simplified. He says, what creates something to be an asset is very simply assets, cash flow money into your pocket. And a liability takes money from your pocket. So for most people, their houses are not assets or liabilities because every month it takes money to live in that house. Even those who say, well, I don't have any debt on my house, I've paid it off. Look, you still have insurance, you still have upkeep, you still have maintenance. So let me explain this. I'm not saying don't buy a house or don't buy this and all this. I said, if this is a house and I rent the house out and every month it's putting money in my pocket more than my expenses, then that house is an asset. Now that very same house, if it goes unrented or somebody trashes it or whatever they do, that very same house can be a liability. So a house can be an asset or a liability depending upon the most important word in business. It's called cash flow. Once again, if cash flows into your pocket, it's an asset. If cash flows out, it's a liability. Think of it this way. If you stop working today, how much cash keeps flowing in? That's from assets. And if cash keeps flowing out, that's a liability. So I'm not saying don't buy a house. I'm just saying don't call a liability an asset.
So to the young people, I just say challenge or question what you've been taught. Because from the Bible, I'm not religious, the word becomes flesh. So if you say, go to school, and you say, but I learned nothing about money. Get a job, you become an employee.
Yeah.
If you're an employee, you work for money. I pay taxes. Then they tell you to save money. Why would you save money when the government's printing money? You know, and get out of debt. Well, debt is money. I use debt to get rich. Most people use debt to get poor and invest in the stock market.
I don't invest in the stock market. So when you wonder why so many people struggle financially, is they haven't challenged the hypnosis, the words, go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, get paid taxes. Until you question those hypnotic trances, you don't change. So when I was a little boy, I had poor dad and rich dad, saying,
in your head.
He's saying, go to school. My rich dad goes, what a waste of time that is,
Right.
And the way my rich dad taught me is just playing Monopoly. 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. I learned about money. I learned to be a capitalist, not an employee. I don't pay taxes. I use debt for money. And I don't invest in the stock market. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying question the hypnotic trance put in your head.
And so when I acquire an asset, I use debt. So what happens, I make money in let's say my business, book sales. At that point, let's say I make $1 million in books. What I have to borrow is like 10 million in debt to buy a property. And because I borrowed the 10 million, I buy a property, and let's say the property is I buy 10 million, it's now $100 million. And all this stuff is the magic called financing. I pay no taxes. Mm-hmm. So the more debt I have and the more property I buy, the less tax I pay. It's called appreciation, depreciation, amortization. If you studied accounting, that's what you would learn. But most of these academic types live debt-free, and they own a house they call an asset, and they drive their Lexus or their Toyota, and they wonder, what's wrong with me? But they never studied money in school.
The other thing with when people say live below your means, you don't like to live below your means, do you?
No.
No. And I think when you say to somebody, live below your means, you wipe their spirit out. It's like saying somebody, if you want to lose weight, go on a starvation diet. It doesn't make you healthier to starve yourself. So I would rather get financially educated. That's why I read your books, because this is my greatest asset. I want to feed my brain so that I can expand my means without getting into excessive debt or where I start to lose. Because debt, like I say, is a two-edged sword. But telling somebody to live below your means is almost inhumane. I never felt good doing it. I wanted to strive to do better every day. I want to do better every day.
But our schools punish if you make mistakes. And all the academic types like the New York Times and the book companies and all this, they attack me. They say, you're not a good writer. I said, well, that's why I flunked out of high school, because I can't write. But it's not that I couldn't write, Vlad. The teacher did not like what I was writing. There's a difference. So I went, this is the story, you want to be rich and happy, don't go to school. Simon & Schuster called me. And I went to New York and I sat down with Simon & Schuster, and the head guy sat down there and says, this book, if you want to be rich and happy, don't go to school, is a pretty good book. I could take it now. But this guy looked at me straight in the eye and says, you haven't told me what you know. And I sat down, I looked at this guy, I said, what do you mean I haven't told you what? He says, I know you know something. What do you know? This guy was like psychic or something. And I went back home, I said, what do I know? He says, when you write the book of what you know, you'll have an international bestseller. And all of a sudden I'm typing this new book and it goes, what do I know? What do I know? And all of a sudden it came out, I had a rich dad and I had a poor dad. And that was the start of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.